Hello, welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We are the #1 talk single network, and we're just really proud about that. I tell you, we've been doing this show for quite some years, and it's really fun because we just had a recent show on with Hirsch Sherman, who does the Financial Wellness Hour. 2 years. This is his anniversary, 2 years. So we're really pleased with how we've grown here on WGSN. But we have gone into new fields. We've gone into going solo TV. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. We're on Going Solo TV on Roku and on Amazon TV. So I hope you'll catch the shows there. But this show is called Going Solo with Cece, and I am Cece Shatz. I am the Doyenne of relationship building. I am a divorce, dating, and a life coach, really helping you through that transition that we all seem to go through when we have a relationship loss. And so we have to move forward. And that's kind of what our topic is today, because what we're going to talk about is something I have never talked about before. It's a whole new arena for me, but we're going to talk about prenups. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they ugly? I don't know. But some people think that they are a necessity as we move forward into a new relationship. So we're hoping that all of you will be there. And so we thought this show would be a great topic for us to be able to talk a little bit about. But of course, we can't do that alone. When we don't know something, we have to go to the experts. And that's what we have today. We have Wendie with us. Let's bring her forward. Let's see if we can add her to the screen. We're having a little trouble here. Let's see. There we go. We got you here. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, doing great. Well, Wendie, you're an attorney and you've been practicing for quite some time. And we're going to talk a little bit about, the prenups. But let's share with the audience a little bit about yourself. Now, Wendie Murstein, she's an attorney. She's been an attorney for 17 years. She's experiencing, a great deal within the family law arena. And she also does other things. So she does a lot about domestic relations, family law. She focuses on matrimonial law, including negotiating prenup agreements, which we're going to talk about today, evaluation of closely held businesses, which is very important. So if you're going through a divorce, and you have a business, you want someone that's very specialized in that. Evaluation of residential, commercial real estate. And you also do trust and treatment of trust and inherited property, division of retirement accounts. So you really do the whole gamut when it comes to divorce and really a split of individuals. Do you not?
Yeah, I mean it's anywhere from the start of a relationship to the end of a relationship and anywhere in between. And so, starting with a prenup, if there is a prenup, then getting to, sometimes there's actually a postnup in a divorce case. If you don't have a prenuptial agreement, but you wanted to do one, then we talk about postnuptial agreements. And then if the marriage doesn't work out, then we talk about, divorce, and all of the different things that you mentioned can be involved in doing a divorce, whether it's an issue on custody of children or the financial pieces, alimony, child support, valuing business assets, different inheritances, trusts, all of the things. And then at the end of the divorce, sometimes, unfortunately, we do have return customers, whether it's to do a prenup for the next marriage, or if there's an issue in terms of following through on a divorce agreement, if there's a modification, if something needs to be changed, or if there's a contempt action. So we do see repeat customers, unfortunately, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But I tell you what, those out there that are listening, if you are going through something, it's important to get a specialist, build your team. And so you want, individuals like Wendie Murstein to be able to help you through those. And if this is what she does, she specializes in it, you want to know that you're having someone that is doing that. It's like, you're not going to go and get operated and have a heart surgery and get, someone that does their nails to perform the operation. You want to go to the experts and ones that know exactly what they're doing. And so let's talk about this prenup a little bit. Let's talk about that. Now, and before we do that, I'd like to ask you, how did you get into, really focusing on on this side of it, on divorce and thinking about prenups and all of this kind of thing. What drive, what was your driving point to make you want to help others in this kind of arena?
Well, so I have a psychology background, a psychology and sociology background. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Just, you hear the age-old story of like, oh, my father was a lawyer, my grandfather was a lawyer. I grew up with him, and he always told me the most interesting case. He was a general practitioner, very old school. It was, he was quite old. So he did everything, and he used to tell me the most interesting cases he had were the family law cases. And so, you know, you are involved with people, you are helping people. So everybody says, well, how do you do this for a living? It's such a horrible thing. And I'm like, you're helping people in a bad most of the time for us. You're helping them in a bad situation. You're not causing it. In Massachusetts anyway, it's a small family law bar. We work together all the time. I've actually been doing this for 20 years. We know all the players, so there's, somebody comes in and they say, how's my case going to go? How long is it going to last? How much is this going to cost me? And I always tell them it depends who's on the other side, because there are some lawyers that are going to just litigate the case, and there are other lawyers like myself that really try to get to an agreement, because the people are in a bad situation, especially if they have children. They're in the relationship forever. They won't be married anymore, but if they have kids, they're stuck with that person forever because they're going to be involved with that person's life. So I try to deal with my clients and try to deal with people in a way that I think is best. And I think it's my clients. I think in family law, you find that the clients that hire you are similar in personality to you. And then there are clients that hire the other lawyers that are similar in personality to them. And so the reason I did get into this is because I thought it was a very good thing to help people and to work with people. I went to BC law school, and a lot of my friends were going into the big law firms and corporate law, and they were going to make all this money. And I was like, gosh, I don't want to sit behind a desk all day and just do paperwork. That's not why I got involved in this. And so while there are lots of different aspects to family law, like valuations and taxes, there's business, there's people, it's so many different things that come together, and working with people is what I like best. So that's kind of how I got it.
My dog's a little bit crazy today, but I love that. And the reason I wanted to ask you that is because there are the attorneys that do it for a living, and they're the ones that do it to truly help. And we are very fortunate that we have a lot of those on our shows, and so we want to really put it out there that we do appreciate the attorneys that do care, and they do it because they're deep down, they truly want to help those that are struggling. And this is when you're going through a relationship loss, it's just one of the darkest times in your lives, and so you need people that are true and blue and want to help out in your corner. So
I do have some clients. Actually, I was in court yesterday, and my client said, I don't know how you do this. And you see people at their worst. And I said, I don't judge you. This is the worst time of your life. Like, I understand you're going through a hard time. This isn't necessarily who you are, or, what happens. I always tell people they should have a therapist, because I'm not their therapist, although I tend to work with people in such a way that I'm like, you could pay your therapist less money than you're paying me. Call your therapist. But it's such an important role that I play, and I feel like it's very important. And so I really try hard to help my clients.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, as we move through, divorce, and we're starting to kind of live our lives and build our lives and move forward, and we're dating and we're doing all this stuff. And then we start going into other relationships, right? And so I have heard many times that before you, get remarried, and we're not going to talk about whether that's going to work or not work, but you want to have a prenup, right?
Sure.
And so tell us a little bit about a prenup. We have never done a show on that. We've always kind of stayed within the divorce arena, and now we're going into the dating a little bit. But let's talk about building that relationship, and why, number one, what is a prenup, and why would we want something like this?
So a prenup is, so for all of the clients or the listeners that you have that are that have been married, they know what a separation agreement is. I mean, 9 out of 10 times people have an agreement as part of their divorce. Some people are like, why is it called the separation agreement instead of a divorce agreement? I have no idea the answer to that question. But 9 out of 10 times you come up with an agreement and then you're divorced. There's not a lot of trials in the divorce world. And so what a prenup is, it's kind of, it's an awful thing to say, but it's kind of like you're preparing for your divorce. In some ways, you're preparing for your divorce if the marriage doesn't work out. So you already have your agreement in place. You know what you're going to do. You understand it. And you're not in this, oh my gosh, we're getting divorced. How are we going to divide our assets? How are we going to, is there going to be any alimony? What's going to happen? What if I brought in money to the marriage? What if money was gifted to me? What if all sorts of different things. So, and it's not just about divorce, by the way. It also is a good way to deal with your estate. So we in a prenuptial agreement, it doesn't just talk about what happens if you get divorced. It also happens it also talks about what happens if you die, what's going to happen to your assets. Mm-hmm. And so there are two different ways to look at it. But the idea is we don't want to deal the person, and I'm speaking for the people that are getting the prenups, we don't want to deal with what are we going to do about it if this marriage doesn't work. And I know you don't want to talk about, second marriages and the rate of divorce among them. They are definitely higher. Third marriages, even higher. And so even people that have never been married before often do get prenups. I see them a lot more now than when I began practicing 20 years ago. And it's just for some people, it's just a good peace of mind thing. Okay, I don't have to worry about my money. For some people, we have a client right now in our office whose family said, you are not going to inherit anything unless you have a prenuptial agreement, because they want to keep the money in the family. And so, some people have no idea what their families are worth, but they're told they need a prenup. Right. Some people have been married before and know what the divorce is like and know they split their assets and said, I'm not doing that again. I love my, fiance or whatever it is, but if this doesn't work out, I want to have my assets, saved and for either my children from my first marriage, or I want to have it something set up so that I don't have to worry about it and I don't have to think about this again. I don't want to have a litigation again. So it's kind of like, okay, what are we going to do? And then if this marriage doesn't work, then we're kind of set for many things. You cannot, in a prenuptial agreement, bargain away the rights of children. So you cannot talk about, what a parenting plan will be for children. You can't talk about child support because that's always the judges always have the right to deal with that. So you don't talk about the children in the prenuptial agreement. You can talk about alimony and asset division and those type of things. And so those are the key things. So it's like it's similar to what you would see in a separation agreement. It's called a prenuptial agreement, and it deals with the things that a separation agreement would deal with. And I always tell my clients, if I never see you again, if you never pick up this piece of paper again, it's a win.
Right. Whenever we talk about a prenup, everybody always kind of taboos it, oh, we don't want to do that, things like that. But the reality is, it's just a clear understanding, right? And these are the things that you really, if you're getting married again for the second time, third time, or whatever it is, if you are getting married again, you need to have that clear understanding. You need to have those hard conversations that, okay, if something happens and this doesn't work, what are we going to do? If again, it's just like you're planning your estate, right? How are we going to do this? We both have children, we both have other families. How are we going to do these things? So these hard conversations are important to take place. They're important to do. And I think if you truly love each other, you're okay with talking about this stuff, putting it down, understanding what it is, right?
I always say, if you can't have that conversation now, how is the relationship going to work? Because it's a hard conversation, no doubt about it. But if you can't communicate, I mean, as we all know, communication is key in a relationship. And if you can't communicate, whether it's about the easy things or the hard things, your relationship's probably not going to work.
Right. So, I mean, to be able to talk about it and then say, okay, this is what I want. If something happens to us, these are the things that I want. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And then you can put those things down, in the thing, because a lot of times, a lot of our listeners are older, and they're looking at, they've been in long-term marriages and they're divorced, and they've had to split a lot. They've had to lose a lot. And so they don't really want to lose again. They don't feel like losing that again. But I look at the prenup as also being a sense of security, because it allows them, those that have lost, to have a clear understanding of where they're going to be. And then it also allows the ones that are stepping into the relationship to have a clear understanding of, okay, if something does happen, this is what I'm going to receive. So it's kind of like a balance. It balances itself, and it really allows you to be able to figure that out, what it is. Now, one question I wanted to ask you is, so what happens if you're coming up with these ideas of, you're dividing maybe your estate, right, according to what it is now, right? What
Yes.
this person's bringing in, what the other person's bringing in, and then you're starting to kind of divide that up. What happens with the marital stuff as you grow and hopefully you maybe build together? What happens with that?
Well, so there's lots of different ways you can go about doing it. So some people will come in, and a typical prenuptial agreement will be like, you keep what you bring in, I keep what I bring in, and whatever we earn together, we share equally. And so the idea is like, okay, we're married, everything else is going to be joint. But if I had these assets, retirement account or investment accounts, I want to keep that separately. But if it's joint, then it's split equally at that. If there's an end of the marriage, it will be split equally. Or if someone dies, whatever was joint, their children, if they had children from a former marriage, would get half of what the joint stuff is, and the children would get, what, for example, if the mom died, they would get mom's estate. And so that's one way of doing it. There's other ways of doing it where it says, you keep everything yours, you keep everything, his, and then if they do earn something during the marriage, if it's kept separate, it's still separate. And so some people want to keep things separate the entire time. They were really, hurt during their first marriage, and they say, I'm never sharing anything. And that may be okay, depending on what the assets look like on each side. So one of the big and most important things in a prenuptial agreement is the financial disclosure. And so there always has to be a financial disclosure for each party. What are their assets? What is the income? Is there any expectancy? Are they going to get an inheritance? So that you know what you're waiving. If you don't know what you're waiving, or something is not on that list, then that thing that wasn't on the list may be up for grabs if the marriage doesn't work, because it wasn't listed in the prenuptial agreement. Of course, what you have, like you said, right now isn't necessarily what you have at the end of the day. And so in Massachusetts, the way a court would look at a prenuptial agreement is 2 times. Was it fair and reasonable at the time of execution of the agreement? And then, is it fair and reasonable at the time of the divorce? And so if it's not fair and reasonable, then it can't be enforced, both of those times. So if somebody brought in, a certain amount of money, but then it, becomes a huge amount of money, and the other person didn't bring in much of anything, and that other person doesn't have much of anything at the end, if that person is essentially stripped of all of their marital rights, then that prenuptial agreement may not be enforced. And so you can't say what you're going to have or what you're going to inherit necessarily. I always have clients whose parents say, well, we have this much money, but, we're retired, and, we like traveling, and we like our lifestyle. So we don't know what we're going to leave our children with at the end of the day. And there's 4 children. And so we just put in, a clause as to what we expect it to be as detailed as we can, because we obviously want to protect our clients' rights. But it really depends on the terms of the agreement as to, is something in somebody's separate name, or is it in their joint names? Because if it's in their joint names, it's become now a marital piece that can be split. If it's in separate names, it won't necessarily be split. But there are so many different ways we can draft an agreement to work with our clients as to what it is they're looking for. So sometimes people keep everything separate, but we talk about different lengths of the marriage. So If after 5 years it doesn't work out, then they each walk away with what they came in with. If between 5 and 10 years the marriage doesn't work out, maybe the person with less money gets a percentage, and that percentage grows over the length of the marriage. So the longer the marriage, the more that person gets. So they're not stripped of all their marital rights.
So it's a little bit of an incentive.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a client once who said, well, I've been married for 8 years, but if I'm married for 10 years, I get an extra 10%. So I'm going to wait it out. And I said, you do that.
That's funny. Well,
Yeah.
we're going to have to take a quick break. And when we
Of
come back,
course.
let's talk a little bit more about it. And then also about how it would affect your estate, because I think that's something that our listeners are thinking about too, is because, how do they handle their estate? And if we're going to have a prenup, and, and if you let's say you're only going to be living maybe the next 15 years, so, that kind of thing. So your estate is an important issue. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how that can work as you move forward. So today we have with us Attorney Wendie Murstein, and I want to make sure we share all of the information. You guys can contact her at fieldsdentist.com. That's fieldsdentist.com. It's fieldsdennis.com. Just go to Wendie E Murstein, and that's Wendie, and then her middle initial E, Murstein, Murstein. And if you want to just make your life a lot easier, just call her. It's at 781-489-6776. Just ask for Attorney Wendie Murstein. You'll get her secretary, and then you can contact her as to whatever it is that you're interested in doing. So again, that phone number is 781-489-6776. So you guys stick around with us. We're going to talk a little bit more about understanding the prenuptial agreement with our wonderful guest here, Attorney Wendie E Murstein. Thank you, Wendie.
Sure.
Okay. Hang on, everybody. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. You guys are listening to the Going Solo with Cece show, and we are so pleased to have you with us today. Today we have our wonderful guest, Wendie E Murstein. She's an attorney in Massachusetts, and we're talking about prenuptial agreements. The first part of the show, we talked a little bit about, of course, your 20 years, right, in being an attorney, helping people in family law. But we talked about the agreement in itself, and so how some people think it's such a taboo, right, that it can ruin a marriage. You're starting out in a negative fashion, but our way of thinking here on Going Solo is we switch it, right? We think that we should move towards positive, and to have clarity in our lives and have that security, that feeling of security, is certainly one that we all want. And so we talked a little bit about that. We talked about, is it fair and reasonable, right? And that's what the courts are going to look at. Is this agreement fair and reasonable? So as we're thinking about doing a prenup, we want to keep that in our mindset. Is it fair and is it reasonable? Is it fair and reasonable not only to ourselves, but to our potential partner and to our families, both our families joint? So I think that if we have that attitude as we're moving forward in life and as we're thinking about doing a prenup agreement, I think that we'll have the right mindset and we'll create a document that has clarity and that can help us through if there is a difficult in the situation. And it can be anything. We'll talk a little bit that as we move forward with that. But let's talk about how is this going to affect our estates, right? Because we're wondering, is this going to make a difference when we start doing our estate planning? So, Wendie, let us know if that's going to make a difference, if it's going to affect our estates if we do a prenup.
So most people should be fine with their estate planning because they know what the prenuptial agreement says, and you can draft a will after the prenuptial agreement. So the only thing that people really have to, it actually makes things a little bit easier and more clear, like you were saying, because you know what you're going to have and what you're going to end up with, as opposed to in a divorce where if you don't have a prenuptial agreement, the assets can be divided, whether they're divided equally or in some other way, you don't know. And so you can't really plan. But when you have a prenuptial agreement, you're planning for your estate, you're planning as to what you want to do. And so if you have your separate assets, you know, like whether your kids or, you know, whomever you want to leave your assets to, that stuff is going to be set aside and you can do that. And then the marital stuff, whatever it is you have, will be divided. Most likely we use in a prenuptial agreement, we say 50-50. So you have half of whatever's marital and then your separate assets will be kept aside. So it actually makes things easier to do estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why many people do it.
Oh, I'm sorry. What about if, my question was, is if, if you die, let's say you die and you don't have maybe an estate already, your estate planning done, but you die, does that prenup die like with the person, like a power of attorney would, right? You have a power of attorney, and when they're deceased, that ends. They no longer have power of attorney. So is it the same thing with the prenup? So then how does that work when you don't have an estate already, you know, your estate planning already done, and you know things are maybe still kept separate? How does that work?
I think I'm a little confused by your question.
I'm sorry. But if you say, for instance, you're married, right?
Yeah.
And you're keeping things separate. So
Sure.
there's some separate things and there's some joint things. Of course, joint things we don't worry about too much because they're joint. But,
Right.
but when you have a separation of assets and then one person dies and they haven't completed their will. So what happens would it be treated just as you would a normal estate, or how does it go to your partner?
So it would follow. So the deceased person's estate would follow the prenuptial agreement. It is a contract, just like a will is a contract. So it would follow through. So the partner who lives only keeps whatever his or her share of the marital estate is. The separate assets would stay separate, and that person's, you know, whoever the beneficiaries of that person's, even if there's no will. Well, if there's no will at all, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Then it would have to follow. Then it would.
She would be the next of kin, or he would be the next of kin, right?
No, the prenuptial agreement would be upheld. So the next of kin would then go say, okay, these are our assets because of this prenuptial agreement. Mm-hmm. So it'd be like having a will, but, you know, obviously, you know, whoever's fighting about, you know, if there's children and there's, you know, some want to split whatever mom's estate is equally, but other says, I'm her favorite and I was supposed to get everything. They have their own fight, but with the person that lives, the spouse that lives, that person's out because of the prenuptial agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is important. That's an important factor, because I think that if you decided that if your reasoning for having a prenup is because you're worried about losing something in a divorce, right? But you're not worried about losing it if you've deceased, if you've passed away, then you need to make provisions for that. So in your prenup, or even in your estate planning, you can recognize the prenup and then say which one is upheld, right?
Okay.
So is it going to be your estate, whatever you're saying within your estate, you're leaving, one, two, three to your kids, and then your spouse gets, a majority of whatever, your home or whatever. So it's very, I mean, this can be complicated. So you must see an attorney
Yes.
and get this done. Don't try to do this on your own, you guys,
Right.
because it is not something that you want to do.
Right. Yeah,
But
you can absolutely leave more to your spouse, that even if your prenup says that spouse doesn't get it, your will can absolutely leave something to him or her, that you didn't otherwise want him or her to have at the time that you were signing the prenup, or maybe you didn't know about, or whatever it is. But certainly, we always do advise our clients to talk to, we have estate planners in our office. I am not one of them, but I do recommend, and it doesn't have to be my office, of course. I mean, people are comfortable when they use us to try to stick with the same lawyers, but you don't have to. But we do recommend, to have some sort of estate plan, even if it's a very simple one. But it's so important, as you know. Again, if you're doing a prenup and you're trying to avoid the fight, you want to avoid the fight for your children or whomever it may be too.
yeah. Well, that's a gift of clear understanding, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
I think that that's what wills and estate planning is in that difficult time of your family going through the loss of you or a loved one, you want to make sure that there's clarity, so there's something that they're already dealing with a problem. You're already dealing with difficulties, and losing someone they love is going to be difficult. So but I think the biggest gift you can give your family is estate planning. Definitely do things like that. So I think this is a very interesting subject, and one that has ground for um, really being creative. You know, so you can be as creative as you want with your prenup. It sounds like,
You
and
absolutely can. I mean, there's certain things you can't bargain away for. So, there are certain provisions that people want. I've had people ask, well, can we put in something if here, if she gain, this is awful. If she gains more than a certain amount of weight, then blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. Or if there's not enough certain we'll call X-rated things that happen. And I said, no, that can't be in there either. There's certain things we're not going to put in your agreement, but there is plenty of things that we can put in your agreement to make it clear and comfortable and where people are satisfied. And for the most part, I always say, did you talk to your, when somebody comes to me, I said, did you talk to your partner about what it is that you guys are looking for? Some will say no. I said, well, you probably should. Some will say yes. I've had people that have come to me that have said, when I've told them, well, you're going to have to give something up, because if you give nothing and she has nothing and you have everything, it's not going to be upheld. And that person said, well, then I'm not getting married. And I said, well, that's your choice.
yeah.
So there's lots of things that to be creative and to determine what you're going to do. But a good lawyer will tell you, certain things you can do and certain things you can't do. And there are some people that, there's lots, I could tell you a million stories, but I had one client who came in and she had this huge rock on her finger, and it was a second marriage for him and a first marriage for her. And I read the agreement that his attorney had drafted. I said, that rock on your finger is more than he's ever willing to give you. And she said, oh, but he'll give me more. And I said, well, now he says that, but if something happens, you don't know that he will. It's not based on this agreement. And I said, and you shouldn't plan, based on my interpretation of the agreement, I don't think it would have been enforceable. But I said, you can't anticipate that it won't be enforceable and just sign it anyway. So she
Now
signed it.
yeah,
She
this is
signed
a
it, and
question too.
I sent her a letter and I said, I can't recommend you sign this agreement. She signed it anyway. And she called me about 3 months later and she said, what did that agreement mean? And I said, that agreement meant stay married.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you ever amend a prenup?
So you can, but the problem is once it's amended, if it's after the marriage, then it becomes more like a postnup, and the standards, at least in Massachusetts, are much stronger than in a prenup. So Massachusetts is an equitable state, so it doesn't your divorce doesn't have to be equal. And that's why we talk about fair and reasonable, because it's not equal, it's not equitable, it's fair and reasonable. Is it considered fair and reasonable? In a postnuptial agreement, the standard is a little different. And so it has to be closer to that equitable side. And so I always say, try to do what you can and give yourself enough time. So people talk about, well, if I sign the agreement too close to the time that I'm getting married, can it be overturned? The answer is it could be, but it's highly unlikely. I had a client who signed a prenuptial agreement at his rehearsal dinner the night before after a few drinks. Okay. Mm-hmm. The judge upheld the agreement. And so I would say, give yourself enough time. If there needs to be discovery in terms of determining what each of you have by way of assets, make sure you do that. If you want to. Not a lot of people do that, but some people do. They want to know, they want to see things, and they have the right to do that because, like I said at the beginning, it's disclosure. You need to know that what you're waiving, what rights you're giving up. And you don't know that without an attorney. So that's the other thing. Always have an attorney. So if you think your spouse has an attorney and you're going to be fine, that spouse's attorney represents your spouse or your future spouse. That person doesn't represent you. So you need to know what you're signing, know what you're giving up, believe it's fair and reasonable. And yes, you can amend it, but it makes it a lot more difficult.
Right. So the last question that I have for you is, can you get rid of it? Can you, let's say you did a prenup, you got married, everything's going good. Can you say, you know what, I'm going to tear up the prenup and we're not going to have it anymore? I mean,
so you can, absolutely, but tearing it up probably isn't enough because the person that tore it up, the spouse, may say, I didn't tear my copy up, or my attorney has a copy, I still want that to go. So you would need to get something in writing to say that you want the prenup, no longer enforceable. You both need to agree. It should be, you need a documentation that says that you both are agreeing that this prenup is no longer enforceable. It's not that, whatever. You want to make sure you have it in writing, signed, notarized, do whatever you can to cover your butt, because one of the people, the person that doesn't want the prenup, the other one may want the prenup at the time when he or she decides that this marriage is no longer working or for whatever reason. So ripping it up is never enough.
Right. So if you have a prenup, do you need to file it somewhere, or?
You don't need to file it. You should keep a copy of it. Most people don't want a hard copy anymore. They keep it somewhere digitally. The attorney's offices always have a copy. So you go back to your attorney to get a copy if you for some reason lose it. But yeah, you should keep it somewhere safe because it's not filed in a court. There's nothing. Mm-hmm. You lose it and nobody has a copy of it, then there's nothing to be upheld.
Right. So can you enforce just a copy? Can a copy be enforced?
Yeah, these days, as long as it's notarized. So then if somebody said, that wasn't an original, or I didn't sign that, or, because sometimes, because everything's so digitalized these days, we don't sign 5 copies anymore, or 3 copies, or 4 copies. Sometimes we just do 1, depending on the situation or where people are, or somebody has COVID or whatever these days. And so it is, certainly you could do discovery and ask if that's somebody's original signature, and there's a whole, things get litigated, but for the most, it doesn't have to be an original copy.
Very interesting. Well, I guess we're going to have to close, but I wanted to give you some time, Wendie, to be able to say any closing words if you'd like. Anything you'd like to share with us today?
Nothing really. I mean, I would always recommend to talk to a lawyer if you're considering a prenuptial agreement or anything really. I mean, talk to the lawyer, know what your rights are, know what your responsibilities are, know what happens if you don't have one or if you do have one, because that may change your mind. If you have a good lawyer, they're not going to force you into anything or try to get your work. We're domestic relations attorneys. We have a lot of business because, as we all know, there's a lot of business out there for us to have. So if you find someone that's pressuring you, that's not the attorney for you. And always in any kind of family law matter, I would say find an attorney that is a good fit for you, because this is such a personal time of your life. It's a hard time of your life. Whether it's a prenup and you're getting married and a happy time, it could still be difficult. So find a lawyer that you're comfortable with and that you can work with, and that gets back to you, whether it's via email or, you know, a phone call. Find someone that responds to you.
Very good indeed. That's great advice, and we do appreciate the time that you spent with us here,
Sure.
Wendie. So everyone, if you want to get a hold of Wendie E. Murstein, all you need to do is go to the website fieldsdennis.com. That's FIELDSDENNIS.com. And then Wendie, it's Wendie, WENDIE. So it's WENDIE Murstein, Murstein. That's Murstein. And the easiest way is to call her, and that's at 781-489-6776. Again, that's 781-489-6776. And just ask for Wendie, Attorney Wendie E. Murstein, and you'll get her secretary, and then let her know what you're looking for, and she'll get you right to Wendie directly. So we want to thank you so much for being with us today. This is very interesting, a very interesting topic, which is so serious. I mean, it truly is an important, serious topic. So we want to thank you so much for understanding. We're understanding the prenup agreement with our wonderful guest here, Wendie E. Murstein. So thank you again, Wendie. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I thought you were going to ask me about Britney Spears' prenuptial agreement, because that was all in the news. I don't know what the agreement said.
Oh, shoot. We should have asked you about that.
Right.
And we're going to hear a lot about that, probably before and after.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you. Absolutely great having you. Well, everyone, you're listening to Going Solo with Cece. Those of you that don't know me, I am the Doyenne of relationship building. I've been connecting singles throughout on our Going Solo network. You can go to our website, goingsolonetwork.com, and find all of the information there for singles. If you want to reach me, I love to hear and get your emails. It's goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. Of course, all of our media is right there on goingsolomedia.com. So we've got a lot of places for you to join us, and we hope that you do. And I'm so pleased to have you with us each and every time. I want to make sure that we let everyone know our show has been sponsored by goingsoloCommunity.com and meettherightone.com. And those of you that don't know those two websites, I am affiliated with both of them. The community is really helping those singles being able to connect and make that transition into their singles lives. So taking you through the transition of divorce and through to, hopefully dating. So we want to help you through that. And then Meet the Right One is a dating site. It's a brand new dating site, a new concept, very unique. It's a social interactive site. So we hope that you'll join that if you're interested in dating. So thank you again, Wendie. We love having you here on the show with us. And we hope that maybe you'll come back again and talk a little bit about some of the divorce issues, because we talk about a lot of those issues that are so important to our potential singles here today.
Yeah, happy to be back on. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. Bye, everyone. We love having you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.